Hello, everybody. This is Jacob Jans. I'm just letting you know we're about to start the broadcast. Thank you so much for being here. If you're here, let us know in the comment box below. Someone here, Gracie's here, and I can see Gretchen. There's a lot of people waiting for the webinar to start, and we're very excited because Ian is going to be giving a great presentation. So just let us know you're here. We always love to see where everybody is from all around the world. It's pretty amazing how the internet can bring so many people together. Hi, Harry. Hi, Mickey. Hi, Jennifer. Hi, Ben. Hi, Janet. It's so good to see everyone here. We're going to have a great time, and I hope you're going to learn a lot of stuff about getting paid to write as a blogger. I'm really looking forward to Ian's presentation today, as I'm sure all of you are. So once again, we're going to be starting in just a minute. Right now, we're just setting everything up. So just let us know you're here, and we look forward to presenting to you this free webinar, Break into Blog Writing. Ian is going to do a great job, I'm sure. I just went over his slides, and I'm really excited to see him present them. So everyone, we're starting in a few minutes. Hi, Art. Hello, Arjun from South Africa. That's pretty far away from where I am. Hi, Cecil. Hi, Ethan. Hi, Nino. Hi, Lily. Hi, Mickey. There's a lot of people here. It's great to see all of your names appearing in the comment stream. I always find that quite exciting. So hello, everybody. And I'm just very happy to have you here. And we're going to be starting the webinar very, very shortly. Ian, are you ready?
I am.
Okay, here is Ian Chandler.
All right. Hello, everybody. This is Ian with Writing Launch. I'm the head instructor. Just want to say a big welcome to all of you. I'm very glad that you can make it, whether you're watching it now live or during the replay. Very glad. I'm looking forward to interacting with all of you. I just want to set the agenda for today. I'm going to go through some slides that I have prepared, the webinar itself properly, and then we're going to have a Q&A session at the end. So if you have any questions at any point about any of the material, just put them in the comment box down below, and I'll answer as many as I can. So let me go over what today's webinar is going to be about, and let me share with you what I'm looking at. All right. So today's webinar is going to be material that I've pulled from our course, Break into Blog Writing. So if you are looking for an easy way to get started as a freelance writer, or even just try out a different type of writing and make some money on the side, this is a great option. So I'm going to be going over what blog writing is, how you can do it, and how you can get the most out of it. So without any ado at all, let's get started. Right up front, I want to share with you the problems that I'm going to be helping you solve in this webinar, because as freelance writers, just as writers in general as well, we have a lot of problems, and some of them are quite difficult to solve in some instances. So what I'm going to be doing is helping you solve some problems that I know a lot of you have. So the first problem is how to find writing jobs. I know a lot of you struggle with this, and it's something that I struggled with a lot as well. So I'm going to be showing you how you can use blog writing to find good, high-paying writing jobs. Next, I'm going to show you how to create better article pitches. So you likely have pitched to publications before, whether that's a magazine or just a blog, and you might have struggled in the past if you aren't used to pitching. So I'm going to go over briefly how you can create a really good article pitch that's going to increase the chances that you'll get published and thus paid for it. And finally, I'm going to talk about how to leverage relationships with editors. And I'm kind of excited to talk about this because this is not something that I've talked about before. I wanted to include this in this webinar because I wanted to give you guys something really valuable. And this is, I think, one of the most valuable pieces of information that you're going to pull from this webinar. So right up front, if you struggle with any of these problems, just know that I'm going to be helping you along the way. And if you have any questions at all, like I said, please ask them in the comments below. And if I don't answer them in the webinar itself, I'll get to them during the Q&A. let's start by just defining what blog writing is, because there are some different definitions that are floating around. I define blog writing as writing articles for online publications that accept submissions from freelancers. So right there we can see that I'm just using blog as a catch-all term for online publications, because in this day and age, there really isn't a line between publication and blog when it comes to the internet itself. So I'm just using that as a general term. And this is basically, it's also known as guest posting or guest blogging sometimes, but I just call it blog writing just to keep things simple. So now that we're clear on that, let's talk about why should you choose blog writing. So if you're, even if you're brand new to freelance writing, or even if you've done it for a while, why is this something that you might be interested in? First, I think, is the most important reason, and that's it's a lucrative opportunity with lots of room for growth. So, this is one way to get paid really well as a writer. It's how I've gotten a lot of great jobs. So I've gotten a lot of next level opportunities, and I know that it can do that for you as well. And it pays so much better than content mills or freelancing platforms like Upwork. If you're on, these sites making, pennies every day, then you're going to be really excited by how well blog writing can pay. It's very easy to get started, and even if you don't have any experience, it's still super easy. And I know this is something that a lot of freelance writers struggle with, even writers who have been at it for a while, is that they're afraid that they don't have enough experience to go to the next level. And what I'm going to show you today is that even if you don't have any experience right now, you don't need it. And I'll show you how to break that barrier just by pitching well, having good ideas, and selling yourself well. And last but not least, it's fun and rewarding work. It really is. It's a lot better than having to do some one-off writing job on Upwork that you really don't like, that you're not emotionally invested in. With blog writing, you get to choose what you write about. You get to choose how you write it. There's a lot of room for flexibility and personality in this work. Now, I wanted to share with you my freelance writing roadmap. And the reason I'm sharing this is because I used blog writing to really take my career to the next level. And before that, I wasn't doing too well. So I want to show you the exact roadmap that I kind of went through and the problems with it, and where I ended up now. And I'm hoping that it can strike a chord with you, because I know this is a similar experience to a lot of other writers. So I started off on a freelancing platform. I'm not going to mention which one because I don't want to give any attention to it, but it was really, really bad. I was writing 250 words for $5, which is like a penny per word, I believe. I think it's 1 or 2 cents per word. And that was I think that was like the low point of my freelance writing career, because I wasn't choosing who I could work with. I wasn't choosing the type of work I could do. I was barely making pocket change. I mean, I was making not a whole lot. And even when I raised my prices, I was making, enough to buy a few groceries here and there. It really wasn't much. So I didn't like that. And after a while, I realized that I needed to go somewhere else, because all I was getting from the freelancing platform was negative stuff. I wasn't making enough money, and there were no career possibilities. There was no upward trajectory that I could follow. It's not like if I worked hard enough, I could become a staff writer or something like that. I was, in the end, I was wasting my time. I really was. And I'm confident to this day, especially now that I look back on that time in my career, if I had just skipped the freelancing platform and gone directly to other avenues, I would have been, 6 months to a year ahead of where I am now. So in that way, I really set myself back, and I didn't even know it at the time. So after I was kind of getting, disillusioned with the freelancing platform, I decided to go to blogs and online publications. This was, to me, the easiest way to get started, because it was something that I'd kind of read about. I'd seen some sites suggesting it as an option, and so I read up on it a little bit, and I looked into it, and I was thinking, oh, this could be something fun to do, and it could just be better paying than the work I was getting on the platform. And I ended up, indeed, I got high paying work. I got job and networking opportunities. It was really, really beneficial for me as a writer, and it was sort of my first glimpse into what a freelance writing career could be like. It was really positive, really beneficial. I really enjoyed it. And eventually, that led me to get consistent work, not only from blogs, but from clients that I got by using articles from the blogs in my portfolio. And I eventually actually became a contributing writer for multiple blogs. So what happened is I, had submitted a couple articles to a blog, and then that one thing kind of led to another, and I ended up just becoming a writer over and over again. And I wrote some of my best portfolio pieces in those times, and I got paid really well for my work. So this is the roadmap that I followed. And I know this isn't everyone's roadmap. I know yours might look a little different, but I know there are some people that are watching, this might be their roadmap. So what I want to ask you is, where are you on this roadmap? And even if this isn't your exact roadmap, I want you to think about kind of where you are. Are you at the freelancing platform stage where you're just kind of grinding it out day after day and not really making a lot and wishing for something better? Are you in that blogs and online publication stage where you're kind of getting that first glimpse into what it could be like? Or, are you achieving consistent work and, having solid positions at publications or with clients? I think, wherever you are on this roadmap, there's no wrong place to be. But my hope is to take those of you who are at the first two early stages, whether you're on a platform or you're just sort of getting that first glimpse. And I want to help in this webinar take you to that last stage where you can get consistent work, so you don't have to worry about, getting paid. You don't have to worry about looking for work all the time, and you can just have a solid job and ways to get work that are easy and are easy to replicate. So that's what I want to do in this webinar. Now, there is something that I have to talk about first, and that is I need to ask, is blog writing for you? And this is a question that you really need to think about, because it really is not for every single writer in the world, and that's perfectly okay. But you need to know that's the kind of thing that's for you or not. So I want to give you a quick idea of what to expect when you pursue blog writing. Blog writing requires a few things. It requires working with deadlines, of course, because the publications have editorial schedules, and you'll need to meet those. Sometimes that can be a few days, sometimes it can be a couple weeks. It really varies, but you'll need to get used to working with deadlines. It does require thorough research in a lot of cases. In some cases, if you know what you're talking about, or maybe if you're writing an opinion piece, you don't need to do any research. But most of the time, I found there's at least a good bit of thorough research that is required. So that means just having good research skills. The ability to fill in the blanks is a big one. And something that I've encountered in my experience, and you might too, is that sometimes you may have to write an entire article just based on a title or a topic. A lot of times I've gotten just titles, and I have to write entire 1,000-word articles based on that title without really any other guiding information. And that's something that I had a lot of trouble with at first, but eventually it just kind of grew into a thing where I could easily do it. So that's something that you might have to get used to. And it might require also some additional work, like finding pictures to go along with the article, using some keywords in there, stuff like that. And don't worry too much about this, because if you don't know how to do this, it's pretty easy to pick up. But just know that sometimes that additional work will be there. And above all, it requires self-motivation and time and task management. And I would argue that all of freelance writing requires that, but I think blog writing especially does, since you're under those deadlines. It really requires you to have that personal drive and that ability to manage your time and your tasks to knock out everything efficiently. Now, I know I've just covered this in brief here, so what I'm going to be sending you is a bonus video that will let you further decide if blog writing is for you. We've taken the first lesson from our Breaking the Blog Writing course and turned it into a video, and you'll get a little guide along with that as well. So my hope is that this video and guide can help you further decide, kind of get an idea, a more robust idea of what blog writing is like, and then decide if it's something that you think would fit with you and your writing and just your lifestyle. So look for that in your email coming very soon. Now I want to share with you a simple two-step process for successful blog writing. Now, even if you're not sure if blog writing is for you, stick around, and I think you'll learn a lot anyway, because this is applicable to a lot of fields of freelance writing. But I hope a lot of you are at least a little bit interested in blog writing, and I recommend it to almost every freelance writer that I talk to who asks, what's an easy way to get work? I always say blog writing, because it's really the easy, most straightforward, and most lucrative and profitable way to get paid as a freelance writer today. And I truly believe that, especially if you're starting out, and especially if you don't have a lot of open doors, not a lot of opportunities. This is great. So let's talk about this two-step process. Step one is simply to find blogs in your niche. And step two is to pitch article ideas to those blogs. Now, it's not this simple, of course, and I'll go into detail on each of these steps, but this is just really what it boils down to. You just, have to do some research, find blogs that you think would be good for your niche, for your personality, for your brand, and then think of article ideas and pitch those. Now, of course, both of these steps, like I said, break down into a lot of component parts, so let's talk about those. First, let's talk about how to find blogs. This is something that we've gotten a lot of questions about, because even if you know your way around Google, let's say, it can be really difficult to find the right blog for you. So what I'm hoping to do is to give you some tips and tricks to allow you to find blogs that better suit you, who you are as a writer, your style. Now, first, you need to know what to look for, and I want to cover this first because I think this is the most crucial step in finding good blogs. You need to look for what I call medium-level blogs. Now, what do I mean by that? I mean blogs that aren't incredibly big and well-known, but blogs that also aren't, small, dinky operations that might be run by, maybe one person and that don't have a lot of readers. You want that nice middle ground. And there's a very specific reason for that, and it's about payment, really. And the reason is that small blogs often can't afford to pay writers. They just don't have the budget. A lot of these blogs are, one person paying out of their own pocket, and they just really can't afford at that stage, when they don't have a lot of readers, when they're not making money, to pay writers. And large blogs, a lot of them don't pay. And this is really, in my opinion, pretty scummy, because I think large blogs, a lot of them have the resources to pay writers, but a lot of them don't, because they argue that they just provide exposure. So the Huffington Post is a notorious example of this. They do not pay their writers because they just provide exposure, and there's that saying, artists die of exposure, and that's very true. If you want to be compensated for what you do, and I firmly believe that all freelance writers should be compensated well for what they do, then these really, really large blogs that are at like the top tier, they're not the place to look either. So you want those medium level blogs. Now, how do you identify medium level blogs? There are a few easy ways that I've found to do this. First, you want to look for lots of bylined authors. So a byline is just, where it says by Ian Chandler or whoever the author might be. And the reason you want to look for this is because if you see a lot of bylined authors, that's a sure sign that they have a lot of rotating freelancers who are, submitting articles and getting published on the site. So that's a really good sign that just in the first place that blog accepts freelance submissions. You want to look for an active comment section. The more active, the better. The healthier, the better. And you want to look for also positive press. So, do a little research about the blog. Are they being featured on other blogs? Are they being linked to by other blogs? That's the sort of positive press that you want to be looking for. Now, let's go to some Google search techniques, because Google is a really powerful tool, and not a lot of people know sort of the more in-depth stuff you can do with it. And I always love sharing these because they really can transform the way that you research online. So let's say you want to find a blog just using Google. Let's say you don't want to use any other resource at all. Let's say you write in the spirituality niche. So here are some ways that you could use what are called advanced search operators to refine your searches and get more accurate results. So I'm going to show you some screenshots that I took of actual searches that I performed. And the first one just looks like this. So you'll see this is the Google search bar. And I have the word spirituality, then the plus sign, and then writer's guidelines and quotation marks. And this is using two advanced search operators. So the first one is the plus sign, and that's telling Google to show results that have both terms in it. Because if you didn't have the plus sign, Google might give you results that just have, one word or two words and not everything that you're searching for. And the quotation marks, what that does is that those pair writers guidelines together. So if you didn't have those, it would give you pages that just said writers or just said guidelines, and you want that phrase specifically. So with this search in place here, you can find spirituality publications that have writers guidelines pages. It's really that simple. And this is sort of the core technique with that plus sign and those quotation marks. And there are other variations too, because with the writer's guidelines page can have lots of alternate titles. And I'll talk about the guidelines page on the next slide, but I want to show you these searches first. It's also known as the Write for Us page. So in this case, you would just use the same search formula, but with quotation marks, or with the Write for Us between the quotation marks. And then submission guidelines is another way. Guest post is another good search. So all of these you can see follow the same basic formula. And of course, if your niche is not spirituality, you can just replace it with whatever your niche is. But this is a really easy way to take your Google searching one notch up. And it really helps me a lot. This has been how I do a lot of my actual research for articles, but also for just finding blogs. It's a really, really good resource because this allows you to narrow it down to a really, really accurate degree. So now let's talk about the writer's guidelines page, because this is a really important part of the process. And the reason it's so important is because it has all the information you need to pitch the publication. And it's important that you follow this information. So when you find the writer's guidelines page, this is just going to be the page on the publication site that says, hey, we accept submissions. Here's what you need to do to get published. So to that end, it will have information about payment, about contacting editors, and a lot more. And it's imperative that you learn to read it carefully, because if you don't meet all of the guidelines, if you don't follow all of their rules on the writer's guidelines page, your pitch may be rejected. And this is actually a way that a lot of editors sort of can weed out writers who aren't serious about getting published. There are, it's really easy for an editor to tell just by looking at a pitch if they read the guidelines or not. Almost every editor that I've ever talked to can just instantly tell. And so what you want to do is, meet that first requirement, break that first barrier. And if you just do that, if all you do is read the guidelines and meet them, then you'll be ahead of a lot of other writers. There are a lot of writers who just don't read the guidelines and just think that they can, kind of send whatever and get published, but it just doesn't work that way. So if all you do is just meet the guidelines, make sure to follow them and send a pitch like that, even if your pitch isn't necessarily the best pitch in the world, you'll already be ahead of a lot of other writers who just haven't read or who don't care to follow the guidelines. So that's a really kind of interesting tidbit right there. But that shows just if you have the dedication, if you have that that seriousness about what you're doing, you can get ahead of a lot of other people, even if you don't have any experience at all, and even if someone else does. And to help you with finding blogs, we're going to be sending you a second bonus, and this is my favorite bonus that we have. It's the Paid Publishing Guidebook, which is a compendium of 654 magazines, websites, and blogs that pay writers. And that's just an insane amount. And this has a lot of the best blogs on the internet that you can find today. And it gives you information about payment, and it links directly to the writer's guidelines page. It tells you what the blogs are about. It gives you niche categories, and of course not all of these are blogs, but there are a lot in there. And just because magazines are still a great way to get published, and we're still going to cover information that refers to magazines or is applicable to magazines, we're going to include that as well. So this is really, like I said, my favorite resource. It's just an insane amount of resources in one book. So look for that coming to your email in the next few days as well. I really wish that I had this when I had started, because this would have saved me a lot of time, and I know that it will save you a lot of time right off the bat. So I'm excited about that. So now that we've talked about how to find blogs, let's talk about how to pitch them. So once you've found the blog, you've read the writer's guidelines page, you're all ready to go. What do you do next? The next step is just pitching the idea. So that kind of comes in two parts. You have to think of a good idea first for an article, or have some idea in mind, and then go through the process of actually pitching them, sending them an email, or usually it's an email. Sometimes it might be a form about your article and why they should publish it. So let's talk about that. Now, ideally, you should be a reader of the blog. So the best place to look, really, if you want to find the blog, is blogs that you already read. That's the best starting point, because you're already familiar with that content. Now, if you're not a reader of the blog, then at least read 5 to 10 articles. And this will give you, an idea of the content and the style that that the blog is producing. And you want to analyze them. You want to look at this from a writer's perspective. You don't want to just kind of read them, at a leisurely pace. You can certainly, but I think you'll really get the most out of it if you look at these with a keen eye and say, okay, what's the content and what's the style specifically? What are they about? What kind of detail is at work? And then for style, what kind of writing voice is used? How are the articles structured? Thinking in these types of questions is really beneficial, because looking at it from this analytical viewpoint is going to help you pitch better. And then when it comes time to write the article, you'll be able to write an article that fits exactly with the kind of tone and the kind of style that the blog uses. And it also will just give you a solid knowledge of the topics that the blog publishes. By reading the articles, you get, and the more you read, the better idea you'll have of the kind of topics they publish and what they want in articles, and also who their audience is. You gain a lot of valuable information just by doing this simple exercise. All you really have to do is, read articles and analyze them. That's it. But that simple exercise is going to give you a tenfold return. Now, after you've done that, I recommend brainstorming anywhere from 5 to 15 article ideas. You don't want too many, but you don't want, just 1 or 2, because then you can, go through a list and really refine your ideas and maybe even combine them. And what you need to think about when you're brainstorming these ideas is, could you realistically see the blog publishing these articles? So what I want you to imagine is, imagine the blog, just the site itself, and then imagine each article idea on the blog, and just imagine that you're coming to it as a first-time reader. You're reading all these articles, and then you stumble upon this article that you're thinking of. Does that fit in? Does it fit in with the blog, with the style of the blog, with the tone, with the types of topics that they publish? That's a really important question to ask yourself, because if you can be honest with yourself about that, it will really help you refine the ideas that you have to make sure that you get to the best possible idea. And you want to compare them closely to existing articles on the blog, with the goal of having an idea that's similar yet different. So I'm going to use an example here of Freedom with Writing. So, they post all these great articles on sites that pay writers. So, for example, an existing article that you can find on the site is 7 magazines that pay writers $150 or more per article. So that's sort of like just one example. And this is a close-off example, because there's all types of articles in there, but I just wanted to use this for sort of a direct comparison. So just given this article, just if this was the only article that you knew that was on Freedom with Writing, then you could maybe come up with a potential article like 9 trade publications that pay $200 or more per article. So you're seeing here that it's the same sort of formula. It's just things are kind of changed out, and there's a different focus and a different pay scale as well, which doesn't hurt at all. So I hope you can see how this is just one way of taking even just one article that's on a blog and tweaking it a little bit, having a different focus, having a different audience as well, because the audience that's looking to be published in magazines is going to be different from the audience that's looking to get published in trade publications. So that's one way to easily sort of tweak an idea to fit a blog style and content schedule. And you also want to think about just what type of article is going to best satisfy the blog's readers. What I recommend for this is checking the comments on both the publication site itself, so the actual comment section on the blog, and their social media accounts. And you want to look for what people are saying. Are people asking for specific articles? Are they talking about specific topics? A lot of times blog readers in comments will ask for an article outright, saying, oh, it'd be great if you could do an article about this, or do a post about that. So those are the kind of comments you want to look for, because they can be really helpful when you're thinking about ideas to come up with to pitch the blog. And I recommend at least trying all of these different techniques once, looking through the blog, looking through the comments section. Don't just use one or the other. They really nicely balance each other out. And the more research you do, really, the better. And that's why I said that it's ideal if you're already a reader of the blog. But if you're not, don't sweat it too much. As long as it's, in your niche and you feel good about it, do a little bit of research, do your due diligence, you'll be well rewarded for it. So now you want to settle eventually on one idea to pitch, right? Because I don't think you should pitch more than one idea at a time. It's confusing, it can get messy. For editors, it's just easier to read one idea. And for blogs, for any online publication, really, you pitch like you would for any print publication. So if you have experience pitching to print publications, then it's largely the same process here. And if you don't, that's okay. We're going to go over it. Now, you want to start with a short intro. I just usually talk about how I found the publication, or that I have an article idea for it. And then I go ahead and just pitch the article right off the bat in 1 to 2 concise paragraphs. And I'm talking 2 to 3 sentences each. And this is the hardest part for a lot of writers. We actually have a separate course on pitching, the Bulletproof Pitching System. And the students who have taken that course, a lot of them come to me with these long pitches that can sometimes be a whole page long, like a whole Microsoft Word page long. And I get kind of flabbergasted at those, because if I was an editor reading that, I would just I wouldn't know where to start. And especially if you're thinking about how busy editors are, they don't have time to read basically a whole novel in an email. So you want to keep everything short and to the point. And when I tell writers this, they're usually like, oh man, I don't know if I could do it in that small of an amount. But I think it's once you get kind of used to it, it becomes really easy to replicate, and it just becomes a second nature. And a little tip that I want to give you is to end with a question. And the question can just be simple, like, does this sound good to you? Or, I can have this ready by this date. Does that sound good? It can be really simple, but the reason that I recommend ending with a question is because it starts a dialogue with the editor. And it's kind of a little psychological trick, because, if someone asks you a question, you feel just an instinct to respond. And often that translates over email as well. Because if you just ended with, thanks or whatever, it would sort of be an underwhelming way to end it. But if you end it with a question, you engage the editor, and you kind of you encourage them to respond, really. And that's a really, really useful technique that I've used many times successfully to get a little further in to a discussion with an editor than the conversations I had where I sent a pitch or something and they just didn't ever get back to me. So I've just found that works for me. I would recommend trying it out and seeing how it works for you. Now, after a week or two, I recommend following up if you haven't gotten a response. And the reason I recommend that is because a polite, well-timed follow-up really can mean the difference between publication and rejection. This happens all the time, where an editor will look at a pitch and say, yeah, that's good, but then, get distracted, or maybe something comes up, especially if they're in an office setting, a lot of, busyness can happen. So if you follow up, then you can often secure that publication, especially if the editor was already keen on your initial pitch. So that's a really, really invaluable tip. I can't stress that enough. We've had a lot of case studies where, someone followed up and they got the job, and a lot of people who didn't follow up never got the job. They never got published. So I just wanted to pass it on to all of you. And I can't stress this highly enough. Please keep that in mind going forward. Now, I wanted to show you a pitch that I did. And normally I only go really in depth on pitches in the course that I mentioned, our Bulletproof Pitching System. But I wanted to just briefly go over a pitch that I sent and show you kind of how what I've just described, it kind of plays out here. So see, this is a really short pitch. I just, introduced myself to the editor. I said, I came across this site. I'm very interested, and I want to expand on the middle sections a bit. First, take a look at this section. Just take a second to read it, and you'll see that I just instantly go into the topic of the article that I have in mind. And the first sentence just gives an overview of the article. It says, this is going to explain why you should invest time in creating long form guides. And then I go into detail in the second sentence that expands upon the first sentence, which is just, I'll go over how content like this can help sites rank better and give a blog more authority and value. And then I continued that, breaking it up into a second paragraph saying, I'm going to discuss how to create them. Maybe that would be better for a separate post. So right there, I'm sort of, kind of indirectly asking the editor a question of maybe that would be better for a separate post. And if so, we can do that. And then I finish off by saying, I'll also point to examples like this one. And I just linked to an example of a guide saying, this is going to be the type of thing that I'm going to show you how to do. So in just 4 sentences, I've really done I've covered a lot of ground. I've done a lot. I've given the editor a really concrete idea of what my article is going to be about and why it'll be useful. And then I always have a little line that just says a little about me, and then I talk about myself for just a sentence, and I usually link my portfolio at the end. And this is because I don't want to go on and on with a biography about myself. I just want to give the editor a good idea of who I am as a writer, what my style is like, the kinds of things that I write about, and just the quality of my work. And you'll notice I end with a question. I said, I can have this ready in a week. Does that sound good? And of course, I make sure to say thank you. But there's that question, near the end of the pitch. So that really engages the editor, and it got her to respond. And I ended up successfully getting an article on this blog. And I've gone over that before, but just for the sake of time, I'm going to just show you this. But I hope you can see how what I've talked about earlier in the webinar applies here, just about those little tips on pitching. And pitching is just something that I could talk about for hours, and that's what the course is for. But again, I just wanted to give you a short idea of what a pitch looks like. So what I want to say is, don't worry if you're new to pitching, and don't worry if you think you're bad at pitching, because the only way to get better at pitching is to do it a lot. But I want to give you a little bit of an extra push, and so we're going to be sending you a third bonus. That's the Roadtested Pitch template. Now, what I did here was I took a lot of my successful pitches and I kind of put them all side by side, and I said, okay, what's good about all of these? And from there, I pulled out some common elements and created an ultimate template for a pitch that would help me be successful. And that's what I'm giving to you, because this is, like it says in the title, it's road tested. It's proven the work. It's worked for me several times, and it's worked for a lot of writers that I've shared it with. So we're going to be sending this to you completely free. Just look for it in your email over the next few days. I really hope you're going to get a use out of this. And what I recommend is, when you get it, don't just use it as it is. Take the time to change it up, to rewrite some parts in your own voice, because I don't want 500 people out there using the same pitch. And of course, I think every writer should just personalize any sort of template to their own style, to their own voice. So I hope that will give you a lot of good returns on your pitches. Now I want to talk about connecting with editors. And this is the new bit that I've thrown in because I really wanted to talk about this. Because so much of business, is networking. If you've been in, business for any length of time, you know how important it is to know people. And that's why ultimately connecting with editors means more than just getting published. It means developing relationships that can open new doors for you. And I want to talk about how you can do that, especially if you're not really used to online networking, and more specifically, how you can take something as simple as getting published in a blog and turn that into an open door. So let's talk about cultivating relationships. Now, how do you build good rapport with editors? There are very easy ways to do this. Like I said before, you want to read and follow the publications guidelines. This is super simple, but just by doing that, you're already showing the editor that you value them, that you value their time, that you respect them. So that just right off the bat, that's a really good way to get off on the right foot. You also want to make sure, of course, to maintain a polite professional tone with the editors or editors. depending on how many people you talk to. Usually it's just one editor, but you might be bounced around to a couple of them. But no matter what, you want to just maintain that same consistent tone. And you also respect their time. And this is why I keep my pitches short and why I've had so much success with short pitches. All these long pitches that I've seen usually get rejected. And I've, said to those people who are doing long pitches, I say, try shorter pitches. And a lot of the time they get accepted with those shorter pitches. And that's because, using shorter pitches is not only more convenient for really busy editors, but it does show that you respect their time, and that's a big deal. And now after you've gotten published, you have an in with that editor. You've done business together. You have some sort of existing relationship where you can at least say, I know them, I've had experience with them. And you can leverage that, even if it's just one article, even if you've just gotten one article published, that is. So let me show you how to do that. Let's talk about leveraging that publication and the editorial relationships that you form as a result of that. So the first step is obviously to get published on a blog, and that's what we've talked about so far. So after you've gotten published on the blog, the next step that you can do is just simply pitch more articles to the blog. That's the first way to leverage the existing editorial relationship that you have. And I've done this countless times, and it's almost always been successful. Sometimes, the editor will say, sorry, we're not looking for more content right now, because a lot of blogs have a certain budget for freelance content, but a lot of the times they are looking for more content. They want more content. And since they know you and you know them, and they know that you are a good writer, there's a really high chance that you're going to be able to get successful articles published on that blog, or successive rather. So that's the first step that you can do, and it's really simple and really easy and really effective. And then that can often lead to you becoming a staff or contributing writer. And like I said, this is what happened to me. I just kept pitching articles to blogs, and eventually I just became a regular writer, either by pitching over and over again, or by actually getting a position at that publication. And in one case, I actually became an editor at a publication for a while. So that's one way. That's just one kind of roadmap to a good career. Now, there are some other options you have here. But the goal, of course, of all of this is to gain experience and a good reference. And this is going to lead to an ultimate goal that I'll show you in just a minute. But aside from this, you can also use the articles that you've published on these blogs in your portfolio to get more work. Now, even if you pitch more articles and they say no, then you could just use that article in your portfolio, and it's a win-win situation because you've gotten published and the blog has gotten some good content. It's a win-win. But even if you could even keep putting the articles in your portfolio as you get more published. So even if you successfully pitch articles to blogs, and even if you become a staff or a contributing writer, you can just keep putting those pieces in your portfolio. It's really a good situation to be in. But even if you just get one article published and they say, sorry, no, we don't want any more content, or we don't need any more right now, that's fine. You can just use that one article in your portfolio, and that'll be a good way to get more work. And now both of these kind of roadmaps can lead to just using the experience you've gathered to get more work and build your career. And it sounds really simple, but it's really, really easy to do. And this goes to show, like I said, that you don't need a ton of experience to go to that next level. You just need to be determined about what you do. You just need to follow through, and that can make all the difference in the world. And I hope I also showed you that you don't need a lot of experience to just start pitching. All you need is a good idea and the ability to write. That's all you need. And similarly here, you just need a little bit of experience and the tenacity to keep going forward and build your career, because once people see a portfolio that has some solid pieces in it, they're going to be much more likely to hire you, to give you jobs that might open doors for you in the future. So, pay attention to this slide. This is really useful information. It's stuff that I wish that I had focused on a lot earlier in my freelance writing career, and I hope that it will help you. So in summary, the way to succeed with blog writing is simply these steps. The two-step process that I mentioned earlier. Find medium-sized blogs in your niche, and then step 2, pitch article ideas to those blogs and get published. And then once you've gotten published, you can cultivate relationships with those editors, and then from there, get opportunities that you may have never had otherwise. So now that we've done the actual webinar, I want to open it up to questions and take a minute to answer them. If you've had any questions about the material, please ask them below. It can be about any aspect of blog writing, anything that I didn't cover maybe in the course, or if you just need clarification on some of the topics that I covered, whether that's pitching or connecting with editors or finding blogs or any other miscellaneous question, please feel free to ask in the comments below. And we have about 15-20 minutes left. We'll answer as many as we can. And yeah, so let's go with that. Let me stop screen share. There we go. All right. So now, like I said, if you have any questions at all about any aspect of blog writing, please feel free to ask down below, and I'll get to as many as I can. And I hope this has been a really good webinar for you so far. And I really like doing these Q&A segments just because there are a lot of kind of finer details that kind of pop up in these Q&As, and you can learn a lot from those. So that's great. All right. So we have a question from Ellen who asks, is it all right to write a question to a blog editor if something is not clear? Yes, it definitely is. And ideally, that's what the writer's guidelines page would do. And a lot of blogs go through, a lot of detail in their pages, but some of them are kind of not clear. But, the editors are there to help you, to answer your questions. And while you need to respect their time, you don't want to send them, you don't want to bombard them with email after email. If you have a question on something, definitely feel free to ask. Any editor worth their salt is going to take the time to say, oh yeah, let me clarify that. And then from there, you can go on and pitch your idea or what have you. So that's a great question. Thank you so much. Oh, here's a good question from Lily BC, who asks, wouldn't using the smaller blogs or larger blogs give you something for your portfolio until you get to the medium blogs? Yes, but at a cost. And I'll share my personal experience with getting published on those smaller blogs. When I started out, I was, just kind of looking for anywhere that would take my work. And as a result, I wasn't really choosy about where I published. I wasn't looking for compensation. So I just, published on these small blogs. And those gave me almost no return. What happened was that a lot of the blogs that I published on that were these smaller blogs, they ended up just shutting down because eventually they just kind of, petered out and they weren't blogs anymore. And so I had, portfolio pieces just disappear forever. I didn't have access to them anymore. And with a lot of them, as I gained more experience as a writer, those small blogs really didn't reflect my work anymore. And more than that, they weren't worth keeping in my portfolio because I only wanted the best in my portfolio. And some of those smaller sites that I published on, they weren't the best sites. They were sites that nobody had ever heard of. So for that reason, that's another reason I recommend kind of staying away from those smaller blogs. Now you certainly can, but I don't like the idea of just kind of doing whatever it takes to build a portfolio. And this kind of goes into a question that Ethan asked about how to build a successful portfolio. What I would say about that is, like I mentioned in the webinar, you don't need any experience to get started on these medium level blogs. You can get paid and published right off the bat. And I think you'll be really surprised if you just kind of go for it. Even if you don't have any experience at all, even if you don't have anything published whatsoever. Like I said, if you have the tenacity, the ability to follow through, and just, if you read the guidelines and follow them and have a great idea, often editors just don't care if you have experience or not. They're not going to discriminate, if you have a PhD or if you, have literally nothing published. And what I also want to point you to is we have on our YouTube channel a video on building portfolios. So give that a look if you haven't already, because that kind of goes more into detail on that topic. So thank both of you for those questions. Janet asks, when can we expect the bonus material? We'll be sending you one bonus for the next 3 days since there's 3 bonuses. So all you need to do is just look in your email inbox and they'll be there over the next 3 days. So bonus one will be in your inbox tomorrow and so forth. Let's see. Oh, here's a good question. It's from Lori Jane, who asks, do you have references you can share for what a writer's portfolio looks like? Yeah, there are many ways you can look at portfolios. It depends on where writers host their portfolios. So you can just even just Google searching, writing portfolio can give you some examples of what one looks like. But if you want to see mine, for example, mine is just ianchandler.contently.com, and that's spelled CONTENTLY, just content and then LY at the end. And I'll post the link somewhere. But my portfolio just essentially looks like panels for the articles. Now, a lot of other writers have different solutions to this, and I would recommend, if you know any writers, just asking around what their portfolio looks like. And like I said, even just Google searching it can return some great results. But generally, it just, you have almost like an image gallery, but that those images lead to your articles. At least that's the formula that I've seen a lot. That I know a lot of writers use that specific layout for a portfolio. It's different from writer to writer. Some people have like a web page with just links to different sites, and I think that works. But the reason that I use the image gallery style is because I want my portfolio to be as eye-catching as possible. I want it to make a good impression, and I think that that's one way that you can definitely do that. So thank you for that question. That's a really, really good question. Here's a good question from Sandra, who asks, if you're ghostwriting for a magazine, can you use that in a portfolio? In some cases, you can. It really depends. I've seen some writers use ghostwriting articles in their portfolios, but many can't. And it comes down to the privacy agreement that you have with your client. So if you have something like an NDA where you're not really allowed to share any details at all about the assignment, then of course you really can't use that in your portfolio. And that's why I don't really like NDAs or agreements like that. But depending on the client, if you say, hey, I'm looking to share this in my portfolio with potential clients, I'm not going to share it, I'm not going to scream from the rooftops that I wrote this article, but I just want to use it for potential clients. Is that cool? And you just have to kind of do it on a client by client basis. Different ghostwriting clients will have different needs and different desires for how you use the content. So just ask, and the worst they can do is say no, of course. And then at that point, just look for other opportunities to get published, and then use those in your portfolio. So that's a really good question. Here's a good question from Shugofa, I hope I'm pronouncing that right, who asks, is it good if I write articles for my university paper? I graduated with my BA in English literature recently, but I'm still in school part-time. I would say it depends. In most cases, I would say yes, that's perfectly fine for portfolio material. I think it's sort of a halfway between maybe publishing something on your own blog, which I don't recommend because it doesn't give you any social credibility, because anyone can set up a blog. And it's kind of a halfway point between that and getting published on some big site. So I would say go ahead and do that. I wouldn't include too many pieces from it, like maybe 2 to 3 pieces topped, but I think it's definitely a good start. So thank you for that question. Well, here's a good question. Excuse me, from Christy, who asks, once you've published your work, how do you protect it? Short answer is that you really don't need to. And this is really a problem that I haven't ever had with content. The way that I just ensure it's protected is by getting a byline, by getting credited on the publication. So if it's ghostwritten, of course, you can't do that. But all publications that are not ghostwriting are going to give you bylines, are going to give you credit, and that's all the protection that I've ever needed. It might be different for you, I don't know, but in most cases, I think that's the extent of the protection that you need to worry about. So don't worry too much about it, but if you encounter a problem, definitely take steps to make sure that doesn't happen in the future. But thank you for that question. Let's see. Here's an interesting question from Susan, who asks, I often get asked by editors how much I charge. My pay varies greatly. What's the best response to this? And this is interesting because I find it a little odd that you're getting asked by editors how much you charge, because in most cases, when I've talked with editors and when I've just looked at publishing on blogs and on any sort of online publication, they almost always have set rates already. So they're not asking me how much I pay. They're saying, we pay this much. And by pitching, you're just, accepting that rate. So I've never really heard of an editor who's asking how much you charge. But the second question I would ask then is why does your pay vary greatly? What kind of jobs are you doing that demand such different pay rates? That's something to consider as well. And maybe if you charge differently for different sizes of jobs, then how are you charging for this? How are you prioritizing this? That might be something that you need to think about. But I would say if you're getting asked how much you charge, find a good rate that works for you. And I mean, setting rates is just going to be, that's a whole topic of its own. But think about just, the amount of work you're going to have to put in and how you can get a good return on that investment from the work. So thank you for that question, because I really am interested, just because, like I said, I've never encountered a publication or any sort of blog that is asking me how much I charge. They just already had set rates. So yeah. But thank you for that question. That was very, very interesting. We have a question from John, who asks, what's the normal period of time to expect to be paid in? Now, this information is usually going to be on the Writer's Guidelines page, like I mentioned. Usually, it's anywhere from a week to 2 weeks. Usually, if you're getting paid by check, it can take longer. But I've usually gotten paid, sometimes within 48 hours of getting published or even getting accepted. Other times I've had to wait a week or two. Some blogs pay, once a month, and they just pay all their writers then, so you have to wait till then. But generally, we're looking at the 1 to 2 week mark for most publications, I think. Let's see. Okay. I was kind of expecting that someone would ask this question, and Art did. And he asked, what are the rules of submitting the same article to different blogs until someone accepts it? And so actually, this question can be taken 2 different ways, because you could look at it as if it's simultaneous submissions, which is pitching the same article to multiple blogs at the same time, or just submitting the same article over and over again. And both are really good questions, and I have answers to both. So let's say I take your question to mean that you're just going to take one article and submit it to a bunch of different blogs until one of them accepts it. I don't really like that idea. And the reason I don't like that idea is because, first of all, in your question, you say the same article, not the same pitch. So I'm assuming that this is an article that you've written ahead of time. And I don't think that is a good idea because, one, it can be a waste of your time if you don't get it accepted anywhere. You just spend a lot of time writing an article for nothing. And 2, I think pitches are just so much nicer to deal with. They take so little time, and you can customize them for each publication. And that's really the core of this answer here. Publications today, sure, they need content, but they want good content. There are a million writers out there. How can you stand out from all of them? Are you going to pitch this like an article that could fit on 10 different blogs, or are you going to take the time to write a pitch with a certain publication in mind, just with that one single publication in mind that is tailor-made for their audience, for their content needs? What route is better? In my experience, it's always been the second way. I've always just customized everything about my pitches to one publication. If that hasn't worked, I just scrap that pitch and create another one for another publication that's customized for them. And that shows an amazing attention to, just care and detail that you really care about giving the best content you can to a certain publication. Now, if you're talking about simultaneous submissions, which is submitting the same article to multiple blogs at once, I don't like that idea either for the same exact reason that I just mentioned. If you can write an article that is so general that it can be on any blog, then you've really written it for no blog. You want to make sure that you customize your content, and that will reward you so much, I guarantee it. So I hope that answer was useful. That's a question that we get asked a lot, and I think I understand the reasons behind it. It's if it was in an ideal world, it would be profitable and you could get a higher rate of publication that way. But trust me, in this day and age, when people are looking for such specified content, when people are looking for the best writer out of a sea of writers, how are you going to stand out? How are you going to break through and be the one who's getting published? So that's something to think about. Thank you for that question, Ari. That was a very good question. All right, let's go through one or two more questions. Okay, we have a question from Christy who asks, how do you introduce yourself in a pitch when you have no experience? This is a really good question. When I used to do this, I would just say, I would just sort of omit the line about my portfolio. I would just talk about myself and say I'm a writer who, specializes in these niches. And that's pretty much all I would say. And that's all I needed to say because the rest of my pitch spoke for itself. And a lot of the times, an editor is just going to maybe even glaze over the line where you talk about yourself because they just really want to know about the article. That's what they're most interested in because, an editor's job is to cultivate and select the best content and the best content ideas from, a sea of writers. And so that's what they're going to be looking for when they read your pitches is just what's the content here? What's the article? How is it going to benefit me and my readers and my publication? And so thinking about it in that way kind of takes off the pressure of having to have, a really impressive bio line with a bunch of credentials. You really don't. You just need to, be confident, talk about yourself just in the way that, you're a writer, you're in these niches, something like that. It can be that simple. So thank you for that question. Okay, let's end on a question from Sarah. And I really like this question. It's a little in depth. But she asks, blogs aren't necessarily based on research and don't always reference other source blogs. Does the blog industry consider this acceptable? And should bloggers formally attribute data sourced from other non-research blogs? So basically, should you cite your sources? Because a lot of blogs just don't. And this is a really good question. And it depends on the blog, but what I have seen most often is there's sort of, at least in the last maybe, let's say 5 to 10 years, been an overwhelming kind of approach to citing sources, and that is just where you'll find, hyperlinked text to another article. And this doesn't always happen. I agree that there are a lot of blogs out there that don't really, do any research at all. But I think it's becoming, at least from the blogs that I've seen and the blogs that I've published in, it's becoming increasingly more common. And, it's nothing academic, you're not going to be using, Chicago manual style here or anything like that. But even something just as simple as a hyperlinked text that, maybe if you reference something like the recent election, and then you can have that text linked to go to maybe a CNN page about the last election or something like that. It can be that simple. So I do think that you should and cite your sources that way. I don't think you have to formally attribute the source, so you don't have to do any sort of academic citation, nothing like a works cited or a bibliography or a footnote or anything like that. Now, also this will depend on the blog itself because some blogs will have guidelines on how to cite your sources, but most of the time, like I said, it's just that linked text. If you go to any blog article, you'll see what I mean. There's just that underlined text that goes to another page. So that's the overwhelming way that I've seen to do it, and that's how I've always done it. And I think that is really just becoming the de facto standard for blog sourcing or blog citing. So thank you for that question. Very good question. So I think it's right at 4. Ended on a good note. And I don't want to keep you all for too long. So I just want to end it here and say thank you very much for coming to watch us. If you have any questions that we didn't get to, feel free to email us and I will personally respond to as many as I can. Our email address is support@writinglunch.com. And feel free to ask any questions that we either didn't make it here or if you're watching during the replay. If you have a question, feel free to email me and ask. I will gladly answer as many questions as I can get to and find and sort around. So thank you very much for joining. I really hope you learned a lot. This is one of my favorite topics to talk about just because it's been one of the best ways to work that I've ever found. And especially if you're starting out, if you're, trying to navigate this new and scary world of freelance writing, it can really be, just a solace to have this way of getting work that's not convoluted, that's really straightforward. And what I would recommend is just going back, through this webinar, watching it, take notes if you want. And like I said, feel free to ask me questions, send me the questions. Again, our email is support@writinglunch.com. and just take the time to think about if this is for you. Again, look out for those bonuses coming. We'll have bonus 1 tomorrow, bonus 2 the day after, bonus 3 the day after that. And that's it for today. So like I said, I hope you had a wonderful time today. Thank you so much for joining us and watching us, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.